Hi everyone, welcome to today's video. My name's Stephanie and today I'm going to be reviewing Olive Ab's two new bundles released for summer. Olive Ab changed up their release for this season, so we're getting two smaller bundles. The first one is called Bright Spot, which released sometime in May, and just a few weeks ago she released the Tidal bundle. Bright Spot features 4 previous summer bestsellers that are coming out of retirement, which is so exciting, and the Tidal bundle has 1 returning bestseller, but then 3 new shades. So we still are getting a mix of new and older shades. As always, I will save more of my thoughts for the end after some comparisons. For now, let's get into the swatches. So starting with the Bright Spot bundle, the first polish we have is Afterglow, and this one is described as a magenta cream. It's so funny because I feel like I always think of magenta as being a bit more pink leaning than this. I would say this is a very red leaning kind of purple shade. At least on me, I would say it pulls more purple, but because it is so warm, it could look a little bit more pink depending on your skin tone. As usual with Olive Ab creams, this was super creamy and fully opaque in 2 coats. Next we have Slater, which is the Cerise Pink Cream, and this one is what I would call a darker hot pink shade. So no surprise, I absolutely love this one. It also has a beautiful formula that is very pigmented. It's just a little bit on the crelly side, so you could see some visible nail line, but I think it does cover up fully in just 2 coats. I'm super excited this one is back because I had shared it last year as one of my favorite Barbie core shades. I think this is like the Pantone color match. Up next we have Strawberry, which is a rich summer red cream. So even though this is described as red, I personally would call it more of like a coral shade. I feel like depending on the lighting or your skin tone maybe, it can just really toe the line between being like an orangey, red, pink sort of shade, which I don't know, to me that is very coral. And this is another favorite of mine, an absolute staple. I am so happy it's back. I love this color, especially for summer, and of course it had another flawless formula. And rounding out the bundle, we have Tang, which is described as a marigold orange cream, which I think is so interesting. I wouldn't have thought to call it that, but I definitely can see that marigold sort of inspiration. It's definitely one of those really light, punchy, citrusy orange shades that does have a strong yellow undertone. It'll probably be more obvious in comparisons later, but I just adore this shade so much. Yes, it is another favorite of mine. And the formula is nice. Again, it's a little bit more on the crelly side for this one, and because it is so light, you might need a 3rd coat. I'm so sorry that I, again, somehow accidentally deleted my full hand swatches of these 2 bundles, but the good news is that I still have my photos of the nail art that I created for the Bright Spot bundle. I painted hibiscus flowers using the first 3 shades and used Tang as the detailing in the center. Moving on to the Tidal bundle, the first polish we have is one of the new shades called Channel, and this one is described as a pear green cream, which I think is so satisfying. I don't know, maybe because it's just reminiscent of a fruit. It's like especially refreshing for summer, but it's definitely a more fun way to describe it because I just would have called this a chartreuse. I feel like it's picking up very lime green here, or at least that's how I see it on camera. It'll be more helpful during the comparison portion again to just get an idea of the color reference next to other lime greens. The next new shade we have is Wake, which is described as a medium turquoise cream. This is an absolute beauty that, again, I feel like is kind of picking up a little inaccurate on camera, where it's leaning a little bit more in that sky blue territory, but it is, you know, more turquoise, so there's like a little bit more green in here. Either way, it's your typical summer turquoise kind of shade that is just so bright and pretty. Though I will say this actually was a little bit more muted than I was expecting. I wish it was a bit brighter. Again, that'll be more obvious in comparisons later, but looking at it on its own, it is super pretty. The last new shade in the bundle is called Buoyant, which is a cobalt blue crelly. So I was pretty excited to see this because we just don't see this kind of finish from Olive Ave often, where as you can see here on the first coat, it actually leans a little bit more in like that jelly sort of category. So it's super translucent and glassy. You can see straight through to my nail line, but it's incredibly pigmented, unlike a lot of other cobalt blue jellies, which are just super sheer. This one built up beautifully in just 2 coats, and I decided to leave it here because I feel like the color was so dark I couldn't see my nail line that much. I think it was a lot more obvious on camera than in real life. Rounding out this bundle and the last of the returning shades is Coastal, which is a royal blue shimmer. It's always so exciting to see Olive Ave do shimmer polishes. This one is definitely more subtle compared to some others that have like a strong gold shimmer. I think the shimmer in this is silver, but because it's in that slightly jelly blue base, it just looks like a blue shimmer, which is still so incredibly beautiful. It has this dainty kind of sparkle. It looks just like light reflecting off of the water, just so stunning. So I got this opaque for me in 2 coats. I could see a little hint of nail line though, so you might want 3. Getting into comparisons, we're starting with Afterglow, and I was immediately reminded of Color Department's Grape Soda, which is a pretty true like red leaning purple, but as you can see, that one is much brighter or more vibrant. Afterglow is a lot deeper in color, but also a little bit more muted. Then for Slater, I wanted to see this next to Deborah Lippmann's Freedom, which is a beautiful like magenta hot pink kind of shade. These are not exact dupes, but they are very close. I would say that Slater is maybe a smidge darker and also warmer. Next for Strawberry, I wanted to quickly show it next to Cracked Polish's Peep Toe from the recent Walk That Walk collection. I feel like these look similar in the bottle, but they are so different on the nail. Cracked is a much darker, more hot red-orange shade. Strawberry definitely has a little bit more of that like pinky coral sort of color, so I thought to show it next to Zoya's K as well as OPI's My Chihuahua Bites, which in the bottle, that one looks like it also could maybe be a dupe. It's like a little bit darker, but I think the difference is a lot more noticeable on the nail, where the OPI is just, again, darker, but also a little bit more red. K is definitely closer, but that one's more pink. And lastly, here is Strawberry next to ILNP's Summer, which again, I feel like may look similar in the bottle, but on the nail, they are so different because ILNP is a true neon. It is like super vibrant. Strawberry is still a bright, punchy kind of shade, but it's just not neon. Then for Tang, I really don't have another orange quite like this. The closest that I have is maybe Mooncat's Acidic or Cracked Polish's Cut on Coral, which sadly isn't around, but Acidic is much lighter and even more yellow leaning, while Cut on Coral is a little bit deeper and more orange leaning. So you wouldn't be wrong if you thought Channel looked familiar. Here it is next to Leafy from last summer's collection. They definitely look like they could be dupes if you're just looking at them in the bottle, but seeing them on the nail, there is a slight difference where Leafy is just more green with that yellow undertone, while Channel is like a true chartreuse. Here's Channel next to a couple of other true sort of lime greens in my collection, like Cirque's Matcha or Color Department's Kiwi Juice, both of which are even a little bit darker or just more green than Leafy, for example, so hopefully you can see just how yellow Channel is. And lastly, here it is next to Nailtopia's Jamaican Me Crazy, which isn't around anymore, and if you were pining for that shade, good news, Channel is a 1-to-1 dupe. I was so surprised to see that these were exactly the same color. Moving on to Wake, the other closest Olive Ave blues are Aster and Willow. Aster was from a spring collection, so that one's much lighter, more pastel, while Willow came out last winter, and it actually is much darker and more of like a dusty turquoise color. So again, the difference is a lot more obvious seeing them on the nail. For reference, here it is next to some true sky blues. So I have Mooncat's Sinking Feeling on the left and Color Department's Hydrated on the right, both of which are a little bit lighter or brighter, more like white based. Hopefully you can see that Wake has a little bit of that like greenish undertone, making it turquoise. I thought it might be closer to something like ILNP's Retro Teal, but that one's a lot more vibrant and like more blue, so it's really not that close at all. If anything, I think the closest that I landed on in my collection was China Glaze's Cuba Diving, which at first looks like it's another sky blue, so it is closer to like Mooncat's Sinking Feeling, but it is more aqua in color, though obviously it is not nearly as dark or as turquoise as Wake. Next for Buoyant, I think the closest Olive blue is Rue, which was from a few summers ago at this point. And I also pulled out ILNP's Tribute from last summer, but both of those are much darker. I wouldn't call them cobalt blues exactly, but they're not necessarily navy blues either. So maybe they're closer to royal or midnight blues, but to get that true cobalt color, the closest shade in my collection was Cirque's Cobalt Jelly. Again, Buoyant is described as a crelly, not a jelly, so it definitely is a lot more pigmented, which hopefully you can see the difference here wearing 2 coats of each. My best guess is that Buoyant would probably be closest to something like Holo Taco's Royalty Blue. And lastly for Coastal, I'm pretty sure I had already compared this one to ILNP's Sea Glass when that one came out, but I figured I can compare it again, as well as show it next to ILNP's Songbird, which was from a spring collection last year. That one has a holographic sparkle in the jelly base though, so it's a little bit different. Sea Glass is the closest, but it has a much larger shimmer particle that almost looks like a microflaky. The base in Sea Glass is also a little bit deeper, so it's not an exact dupe, but definitely super close. I also wanted to show Coastal next to Mooncat's House of Hades, as well as Cracked Polish's Nuclear Coolant, both of which are super vibrant, shimmery cobalt kind of blues. Or at least the shimmer in House of Hades is blue. The base in that one is a deeper indigo purple kind of shade. It's also a lot more sheer. So head on, they kind of look similar, but in other angles of light, you can see that more purple base. Coastal is definitely closer to Cracked, but that one has a smoother, finer shimmer pigment. And the last 2 comparisons I have are with Essie's Aruba Blue and Starly's Oceanic Moonlight, which yes is magnetic, but we are just going to be showing it unmagnetized. I thought the shimmer in both the Starly and Essie were a little bit more similar to what we see in Coastal, so you can kind of see that more on the nail. I think Starly is definitely the closest. The shimmer in Essie is like a little bit finer, but either way, both the bases in Essie and Starly are just a lot darker. So that wraps up my swatches and comparisons for Olive's Bright Spot and Tidal bundles. As always, I'd love to know what you think of these releases, if you're super excited to see some of these previous bestsellers come back, because as I mentioned, I definitely am. I'm sure you already saw that I shared Strawberry and Tang in my summer favorites for this year. So I'm really excited for those 2 in particular, but even the other 2 shades are also really gorgeous. I mean, paired together, this quad is easily going to be like my favorite out of the 2. It just gives those bright, hot summer sunset kind of vibe, which I really love. Even though individually, I still kind of feel the same that I do about Afterglow as when it first released, where it's just not my favorite shade of like purple magenta on me. I think it's just like a little too dark for what I normally love for summer, but I do like it when it's paired with the rest of the shades, especially how I did for my flower nail art. I think it's just so tropical. The Tidal bundle is fun too. Like we obviously have the opposite focus on like more cooler toned shades. While they are pretty in their own ways, I just admittedly am not like the biggest fan of that quad. I would say my top favorite is Wake for its like brighter turquoise kind of color. The 2 cobalt blues are usually just like darker or maybe too bold for what I usually wear. I know those cobalt blues are super popular for summer though, so I do want to try to incorporate them in like some nail art to make it more palatable for me at least, because as a full manicure, it just feels like a little too much. And I'm sure to nobody's surprise, I'm not the biggest fan of channel being like that true chartreuse kind of shade. But of course, that is just all like personal preference. Objectively, the polishes are still fantastic. They're all like those creamy, buttery smooth kind of formulas. And if anything, I am really excited about this Crelly formula with Buoyant. I don't know if that's something new that we're going to be seeing from Olive Ave. I definitely would love to see more of that, because even though it is more pigmented than like a traditional jelly that's like a lot more sheer, I actually did really love like how pigmented that was while maintaining that juicy, squishy, like jelly look. So if we somehow are able to get some more polishes in that same formula, but obviously in different colors, I would be pretty happy to see that. So make sure you let me know what you think about that. If you are interested in picking any of these bundles up or the shades individually, as a reminder, I am an affiliate with Olive Ave, so I will have my link and code in the description box. Using either of those will give me a small commission, which helps support me and my channel. So as always, a big thank you to all of you who do support me through that. But even if you don't plan on picking anything up, I would love to know your thoughts either way so we can chat about it. But thank you so much for hanging out with me today. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!